Hello, I'm Ricky.
And I'm Joe, and this is Season 7, Episode 5 of the Beer and Broadband Podcast, scheduled to come out on April 29th, 2024. Um, so, we're going to talk about some stuff that we're drinking, but the main topics for today are going to be about video games and Chinese app makers being banned from the United States. And I'm not just talking about TikTok. So, let's get right into the beer. So we have the Sycamore Barrel Aged Christmas Cookie Winter Ale. It's 8.1 ABV, and I don't think they have anything on here that describes it. If they do, I cannot read that. Uh, well, jingle my bells and stuff my stocking. A special edition of Christmas Cookie Winter Ale. Hold on to your sugared plums. This barrel-aged goodness is headed down the chimney. And they don't give any tasting notes. I thought maybe they did, but that is just an ingredients list. So,
Okay.
tell me what you think, man. I haven't had this beer before.
It's pretty good. I'm not sure I can taste too much of cookie outside of just the natural kind of starchiness of a dark beer. But it's very bright. You know, got some sweetness to it. Definitely a lot of spices. You kind of get some of those, like, I don't even want to call them like fall fruits. Like, I'm thinking of almost like berries. Like, it's a very bright, fruity flavor.
Yeah, so if you think about a. So take another sip, let it sit on your tongue for you, because I know you got to
Mm-hmm.
like spit it out and everything. And you think about a spiced sugar cookie or like one of those raisin cookie type cookies. That is what I'm getting on the very back of the aftertaste. Now, you should let this set and warm for a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
because, uh, you know, those we've learned from the last couple of podcasts that those flavors evolved. But mostly the barrel age like overpowers all the rest of the stuff.
Yeah, it does. But in all honesty, like it is overpowering in the sense that it is your primary flavor, but it complements all the other ones so
It
well. It's
does.
not really a problem.
Mm-mm.
You know, it's almost maybe a disservice to even call that a flavor by itself because it merges so well with everything. I can give you maybe some of that is like a raisin, though it tastes to me it's a lot more almost like a very fresh grape. Like one of those ones that's like kind of the bright purple. Like it's not quite a green grape, but it's like one of those kind of in betweens.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
like a
that
champagne or something like that almost.
yeah, kind of somewhere in that nature. You know, it's good. I mean, we'll let it continue to warm up. I let it sit in my mouth for quite a while to warm up as well, and it
Yeah.
does brighten up a lot. Um, but yeah, overall, I think I could recommend that one.
Yeah, I definitely would too. I mean, it's too bad it's a limited run. I bought a whole bunch of
Yeah.
limited run beers at Christmas, and that's what we're going through now because we had already like
Oh, now,
stopped the podcast by that point.
oh, now we're just teasing you. You
Yeah,
can't even get it anymore.
yeah, that's right. We're just being cruel at this point. But I thought it would be an interesting beer because when I looked at it, it had the images of it. Well, is on the
Hmm.
thing on both sides is the same. I didn't need to turn this around, but it had like the maple leaf and or the sycamore leaf, and all the like Christmas stuff on there. And so since it's supposed to be like a spiced sugar cookie or spiced Christmas cookie, kind of thing, I thought whiskey plus spice generally goes really well. Um,
Yeah, you know what I might even say now, kind of looking at it, you're right. It is a Christmas cookie. It tastes a lot less to me like a spiced sugar cookie, and more like it's like a really good fruitcake type of deal.
yeah,
Like
like one of those like all-in-one cookies, the everything cookies or
yeah, like
something like that.
if you took what you put in a fruitcake and you instead put it in a cookie, like an oatmeal cookie.
Yeah,
That's kind of what I'm feeling.
yeah, that's kind of what I meant.
Hmm.
Like the oatmeal everything all-in-one cookies sort of deal. Yeah, I could see that. As a matter of fact, I think that probably is more the flavor they're going for here. And if that's the case,
Yeah,
it's like drinking a glass of whiskey while you have one of those cookies. They nailed it.
yeah. I mean, it very much is kind of that fall festive holiday sort of feel.
Yeah, I agree. Well, then I think we need to change our answer there. Don't just try it. If you can find this beer or they release it next year, get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so let's talk about, and I had deleted the actual name of the of the thing by
Hmm.
accident, but um, I just rewrote it. Possible Chinese app ban in America. And I'm not just talking about TikTok.
Mm.
Any of the like Sheen, any of those things,
Yeah.
Baidu, all that stuff being banned in America, and India's already done this.
Mm-hmm.
So before I go into much about like my thoughts on it, I was reading a BBC World News article on the topic, and they were talking about how it kind of hurt like niche creators and things like that. But what it doesn't really go into is some of the actual problems that you have with intellectual property theft, with just gobbling up all the data, like things that were already like, look, we don't want our American companies to do this.
Yeah.
And there's just no regulation in China, and so they're like, yeah, sure, we follow all your laws in America, but in China we don't have to follow those laws. So any of the data that gets exported back to China, that's why are you even worried about that? That's in China, you know. So like it doesn't talk about any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I probably will say something about that stuff in a few minutes, but just from the article standpoint, it's talking about how the India ban of Sheen, TikTok, all those other things hurt these creators, and then like YouTube, which favors larger creators,
Yeah.
has replaced things with shorts, and then you've got these other things that are used in India pretty heavily.
Mm-hmm.
Those things have kind of swooped in and taken over, so the smaller creators are being harmed while the bigger creators are being rewarded for this ban. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's a difficult topic, right? Because at the end of the day, yes, you are saying that people who are using these platforms for monetization are essentially losing their monetization or their stake in it, right? So like if you are a TikTok creator and you're making money off of TikTok, when TikTok goes away, you have lost your money being made off of TikTok. And that can have, financial repercussions for you, for your community, and things like that. Those are all very real. And those are also very sad things to happen at the micro level. Like, I'm not going to tell someone who is making money off of TikTok, oh, you're a bad person for making money off of TikTok, and you shouldn't have that money.
Yeah.
That's not the goal. But what these platforms do, in my mind, is they cut you off a small sliver of the money they make stealing data.
Yeah.
To give to you, to incentivize you to make things to help them steal data.
Yep.
Right? Like, it's no individual creator or contributor's fault that happens. But that's how those platforms are set up. So when you have to look at the macro scale and say, hey, any company based in China has to allow the Chinese government access to their data, just period. There are no data protection laws over there. And does that put people at risk?
Mm-hmm.
You can't really think about, okay, but, Jonathan, who maybe works on a farm and makes videos of his cows, who uses that money for good things, like maybe taking care of his cows or contributing to his community. He's still a cog in that China is stealing data.
Yep.
And he's not guilty for that. Like, he shouldn't be directly punished for that. But you can't sit around and say, okay, we're making enough money off of this. It's okay to steal people's stuff.
And I don't think that TikTok has ever actually, like, I think Baidu is the company that owns it. And I know that where you get into like some like kind of weird legal stuff, TikTok, the guy that like actually owns it is not, he lives in Singapore. He's not like a Chinese resident. He's not Chinese. He has nothing to do with China. But then you have a Chinese company that has bought a major share, and then they have the servers that are hosted in China. Not all of them are. So like that's really the problem. It's not that the people that own it are Chinese. The company is actually not like from a founding standpoint a Chinese company, but where it's based out of is, and because of that, and then the controlling share of the other company that owns it, like the funding company to get everything off the ground for it was Chinese, and therefore they have access to control what happens with TikTok.
They've
and
still
that's
got
the
those
problem.
data centers there, and at any point, those data servers in their entirety can be replicated and used for whatever China wants.
Exactly. So, um, is China like worse than the United States? No, but we don't live in China. We're not Chinese citizens. So, but they do have they do have a vested interest in making sure that the United States or Canada or any of these other like Western countries and even Europe are not as successful in some areas. They try to make them conform to some of their ideals and laws and things like that, and they don't really have any like authority over them. So by putting things like TikTok and stuff like that out there, they do. Basically, I'm saying all this to say background on why I completely agree with you on this topic, right? Like it's almost like not. I kind of expected for you to be a little bit like, well, there's like this thing, like you have like some sort of like, because sometimes you do that, right? But I mean, in reality, we probably should ban TikTok, and we probably should ban some of these other Chinese companies that are basically like doing like the fast fashion stuff and everything like that. And they've got these questionable human rights kind of problems. I mean, on one hand, I can see someone on TikTok saying free Palestine, which not getting into whether or not they should or shouldn't, because I don't want to offend anyone on that standpoint. But my personal view is that no one should be oppressed or anything like that. So it's not like I'm saying they shouldn't be. But somebody's on there like free Palestine, justice for the world, blah 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 blah, and then they're wearing a shirt they bought off Shein that is being on a Chinese app site like thing, also is being promoted on this thing, and they're talking about some sort of like Chinese company in the review of whatever it is, makeup or technology or thing like that they're doing. And while I understand that a lot of the manufacturing power in the world comes from China and over in Asia, and that is fine, the problem is when we let that go unfettered for human rights violations, we are being hypocritical by looking at one group of people and being like, hey, they deserve to be okay, but if it keeps me from getting my like cheap shirt, these people don't.
Yeah, it's a difficult topic, and it's really only a difficult topic when it comes to geopolitics and macroeconomy. But you're 100% right in the human area of it. We can sit down and say, hey, we've got these factories in the U.S. They have to fit pretty strict standards. And I think we saw either earlier this year or late last year, those are not always being followed. We found some kids in it was like a food processor or something like that. I forget what the factory created. But, we try our best to make sure that if you're a legal U.S. employee on something, that our labor laws are being followed. And that comes at a cost. That stuff's not free. Those regulations are great for people. They do cost money, which is why it costs more to manufacture within the United States. But then we say, okay, hey, I'm going to take my factory in the U.S., I'm going to close it down, I'm going to either work with a Chinese factory or in several instances help fund a new factory to be made for me in China, and then they don't have to follow those processes. So I'm making the same item for the same, or if not more of a markup. So me as the corporate entity and making just as much money, allowing terrible things to happen to people in other parts of the world because I can legally get away with it.
Exactly.
And that's the core of the issue. And you can spend a lot of time talking those nuances of, like, can you still afford to have products people can buy if they have to be 100% be manufactured internally? When you don't have cheap $10 shirts at Walmart and every t-shirt costs $40-$50, does that negatively impact the economy and everything like that? But you can't, from a human rights standpoint, say it's okay for me to be bad to other people if it's not okay for me to be bad to some people. Right? You can't draw that line and say, okay, I get it. I get that you don't want to be abused, so you're going to lose your job. I'll give it to someone who will be abused.
Yeah.
That is really probably the core of a lot of manual labor in the world. We talk a lot about tech labor and like things moved to India, and now we're seeing a lot of things moved to kind of Mexico because it's trying to follow the like cheapest tech. And we talk a lot about how that generally leads to kind of worse products, worse supported products. But on average, I'm not saying these countries have as good of working rights as America, but on average, if you're working in a call center, you are not getting crushed in a machine.
It's true.
You're working in a call center. You're probably still not getting paid as much as you're worth. You're probably still not being put in a good work environment. But I'm not worried how many people are dying in a call center every day. But when we start talking about these factories that are having to put up suicide nets and stuff like that, and some of the manufacturing in the world is just like majority orphans.
Yeah.
It's like that's rough. We should not really be supporting economies that are going to operate like that.
I completely agree. And I mean, America used to operate like that, right? Like both Europe and America and Canada, all of those places used to operate like this. And we decided that was bad.
Yeah. But see, now you're getting into the geopolitical, and that's the other side of the argument, which I was fairly ignorant to for most of my life. But I had a professor I was talking to once kind of bring it up when we start talking about fairness. The West got to make its money doing this stuff so that we could be rich enough to move away from it. We talk about that with like a lot of very like fossil fuel intensive energy production and things like that. And now if we just flat out ban it in other parts of the world, we're not allowing them to progress in the same way we did. So it's like, again, I'm not arguing one way or the other, but that is an interesting argument. That is like, if we're going to go to China and say, hey, China, as long as you're running this type of energy, as long as you're employing these types of people, and as long as your mortality rates in whatever industries are this level, we will not do business with you. They can't make the money to get better. So do we have a responsibility, if we ban those things, to help them get better?
I would say yes. I mean, since it's a global economy, from a moral standpoint, we should be like, look, we've learned that this is the wrong way to do things. This hurts people, not helps them. There's other ways to handle this. If you want to partner together to do this, we can do it. We'd be willing to do it, but we will not accept these goods and services that are made under this sort of thing, because we've seen the harm it does.
Yeah.
Is there a better way to do it? Are there other alternatives? Absolutely. So the problem with that argument in my mind is it's saying the only way to get to the point that America and, any of the Western European, Western, U.S., Canada, stuff like that, got wealthy, is to basically harm people. And if that is the only way to get better, like if that's the only way for India to get better, if that's the only way for China to become, better and stuff like that, then, the world is doomed.
I think it's less of an argument that you have to harm people to make money. It's the natural progression of like research and development. So it's like our original factories constantly broke, had very tight, cramped spaces where you would have to try and go fix things. That's why children were in factories. The children weren't lugging stuff around. They were in machines, pulling levers and doing things like that.
Well, they were in machines fixing little parts.
Crawling in if something broke. We made enough money with the higher productivity, we were able to make better machines that didn't have that problem. And eventually we kind of aged out of that function no longer needed to be performed, which was one of the things that helped make it easier for children not to need to be involved in factories.
I completely agree with that. Like, I'm not ignoring that by saying that. But we now have the technology to make those machines. We could just be like, here is how you make those machines. You don't need to have children crawl inside of machines to do this. We know how to do it.
Yeah, but that's not linear. Like, that's what I'm getting at. We know, like, let's say right now, U.S. knows how to make a perfectly 100% automated facility. You know, we're going to pick a random, APAC country. It doesn't. Now, it doesn't help if we give them the schematics, because they still don't have the technology to build those more refined parts. So the argument is, okay, we're saying, I'm just going to pick Papua New Guinea, just a country out of random. I don't know if they've got factories. I don't know if they're good factories. Just we're going to pretend they don't have anything. Made up country. Papua Old Guinea. And we say, hey, you guys are producing something for us. We don't like the way you're doing it. We're not going to support that practice. Is it our responsibility to instead say, no, I'm not going to do it because you're doing a thing we don't like, and you're not really realistically able on your own to do something we like? Or should our responsibility more be, hey, you're doing that in a really bad way. I'm going to, build you this thing that does it. But then I also have to send engineers that know how to operate it. I have to train you. I have to build other manufacturing. It becomes the Africa problem, is that we came into Africa and we built a ton of stuff and did some not great stuff in Africa. Not saying any of the colonization that happened in Africa was good. But when the West left Africa, we left all the infrastructure behind, and most of it fell to pieces because we brought a lot of technology but did not enrich those communities enough to be able to maintain those technologies. And then do you ever get away from colonization? Like if we go to Papua Old Guinea.
Papua Old Guinea, like I get what you're saying, but Papua Old Guinea could have engineers that come to us. They are taught by us. They learn things in the United States. They spend decades learning things, and then they go back and they start teaching their people how to do the same thing. We could also send people that are mentors that aren't colonizing, that just go there and they help, and they, so that's what I'm saying. Like, that sort of standpoint, omits there are different ways to do that, because in Africa, as you just started talking about, there are people that are literally doing that right now.
Yeah.
And that is causing things to thrive. It's actually like that people are able to rebuild those infrastructures. People are able to do things. They're, getting microloans. They're being shown how to like farm with chickens instead of like, I think they were using some other type of fowl that was diseased. Things like that.
Yeah. Let me try and express this a different way, because I think we keep going over the point I'm trying to make. You, Joe Bradley, have decided you are not going to buy shirts from Papua Old Guinea because they have bad practices. Do you, Joe Bradley, have a responsibility to donate money in some way to help them get better?
Absolutely. I do. I should.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what portion should all of America be taxed to help them?
Maybe 2 or 3%.
Okay.
I don't.
But now you see kind of where the argument is coming in.
I get what you're saying. That Americans will balk at that because they'll say that they don't want to do it. But we have a moral right to do that. Or we have a moral imperative to do that, not moral right.
Okay.
Morally, if we are in a better spot, we should be helping other people to do better.
Okay.
If we see someone who has been hurt lying on the side of the road, and we walk past them, and we don't have like a good reason, and by good reason I mean like, that person was hurt, we are also hurt, or we are going to help someone who is hurt, and we've got someone else that's coming to help this person, so like we're trying to deal with both situations at once.
Okay.
There's like, we morally need to stop whatever we're doing and go help that person who's hurt.
Okay. Yeah. So then you take it the next step. And again, there's no right or wrong answer to any of this. This is just me explaining to you kind of the argument as it explained to me.
Yeah.
Because it made me change my thinking. Okay, so boom. Everybody in America, we've been taxed 2%. We're sending billions of dollars to Papua Old Guinea to build up their infrastructure. And that is definitely getting better.
Yeah.
All the money we've pumped in has increased the quality of life. People aren't getting hurt in those factories anymore. We have pumped hundreds of billions of dollars into those countries. That has now started to pool into elected officials who have now decided they don't like half the population. Maybe they're a slightly different ethnic group, and they're going to go start killing them. Do we send in our military?
No.
Okay. So we sent the money that made it possible for them to hurt those people, but we're not going to defend them. And if we do defend them, now we're stuck in that country.
I understand. I see what you're saying, because it becomes like this sort of colonization thing.
Yeah.
We can do other things than that, than send in our military to deal with those sorts of things. We can put in sanctions. We can allow for those people to come to us instead of being in Papua Old Guinea. There's other options
100%.
than sending in the military.
We put sanctions in, the economy starts to go back down. We let in the people who want to immigrate. Those engineers we trained now work for us. They don't have those engineers anymore. Like it's not a there's a right or wrong. It's why this has been debated for like 20, 30 years.
Yeah. I think there is a more like that. So I understand all those things. Like, this kind of the problem of evil, like, almost, right? And you never get away from it. But there is a, like, I'm not going to hurt people, and I'm not going to, like, be part of things that hurt people, even if it does make things less costly for me. Now, let's suppose that Papua Old Guinea says, no, we want to keep things our same way.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't help them.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, we just step back and are like, hey, all right, fine, whatever. You guys do you. I mean, that's kind of what North Korea did, right? Now, does that mean that we accept anything from them? No. We sanction them. We don't give them, the ability to export. They don't get any imports from us. They are basically a dying country. We have ignored them at this point in time. And as sad as that is, I hate that North Koreans and South Koreans are separated. I hate that they're having that problem. And we, as America, started causing that problem by going in and being part of the Korean War, right? Because they were our allies. Do we just continue to allow, like, do we just go in there and just because some people are suffering? That becomes the question for me. That's where I start having the moral problem there. Like, when you ask all these other questions, I'm like, no, absolutely not. No, just stand like that. That is not, like, why are you even asking that question? That's cut and dry. When you're talking about, like, we've had to take these drastic things and we're looking at a group of people and it's like, they're suffering because I'm like, they didn't do anything. They were just born there.
Yep.
They're suffering because I'm not, like, doing anything. That's where it becomes the real problem with that argument for me.
Yeah. And it's that slippery slope of, like, hey, I love cheap t-shirts. I continue to buy cheap t-shirts from China. I'm not saying I do. I'm saying, like, I'm a person who loves cheap t-shirts. If I continue to buy cheap t-shirts from China, I am contributing to those Chinese factories where those people get hurt. If I don't buy from them, I'm contributing to those people losing what little money they have, working in a place that doesn't hurt them. And if I go in and give money to them, maybe I help them in the short term, but if I made it worse long term, and that's kind of I think the world has realized that the way we did it 100 years ago, or 150 years ago, was a terrible way to do it.
Yeah.
There's not really much colonialization anymore, except Asia still does a lot of stuff in Africa, and they're doing very bad things in Africa. But, we haven't yet figured out how to do it right. Because I think what we're seeing, the stuff that still happens in China and India and other places in the world where we kind of outsourced our stuff, it's like, we'll give you part of our economy, has not, I mean, it's helped in a sense. There are less starving people, 100%. But they're still in bad places.
There are fewer starving people that we're told about. We don't necessarily know. It kind of becomes, the AI problem in the fresh market that we talked about the other day, right? We are told that this is an AI that checks out your your groceries.
Mm-hmm.
We do not know that that is actually an AI because it's not transparent. And then when we go and investigate and find out, or like when eventually the truth comes out, it's just a call center full of people that are looking at stuff and like, making sure
Yeah.
that so we believe that there are fewer starving people, and there probably are, because that would make sense, but maybe there aren't.
You can definitely say that in the micro scale of like when you take particular populations. We know globally there is a lot less, and there's some ways you can test for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Globally, there's fewer
yeah.
starving. I just meant in the places that we went.
You're
to
right. Yeah, we can't point at a particular subsection of China and say it's this without intimate knowledge. This piece better than that piece, based on these actions. But we know overall, because we know some of the terrible starvation numbers in those countries beforehand, that those have gotten better. But just because you're not starving to death doesn't mean you're not getting crushed in a factory.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you're not jumping out of buildings, or some of your children are undesirable, so you're just abandoning them, which is what happens in some of these countries.
Mm-hmm.
Even outside the China, so many children laws that have kind of been relaxed, but just I got my eyes open to some of the stuff happening in certain parts of India where like, oh, this child is born with some sort of small deformity. Goodbye.
Yep, just push them out.
Yeah, they're just giving up. And those things we wouldn't allow in the West. They are allowed in the East, and we're very big customers of the East.
Yep.
And it's hard to separate that, just like the TikTok conversation. It's hard to look at John the farmer and say, hey, John the farmer, you're one piece in a 8 billion piece problem, right? Like, what are you going to do to fix it? You're just filming videos of your cows because it's fun, and maybe you make $200 a month to help buy your cows some treats, right? And to scale that up into let's actually talk about the Chinese nation and its data privacy. And
let's
its
talk about how
economy.
morally responsible we are for making sure that everything works properly. Yeah, I get you.
Yeah, it's a drowning problem because it's a problem of scale. To put it in technology terms, it's like we're looking at one port in a 100 million Twitch network and trying to say, what's that one port doing that's causing all the problems?
Yeah.
And you can never do that. It's too zoomed in. But absolutely, that one port contributes in some way to both good and bad things in the network. But when you only got the one port, what do? You can't fix the problem. Even if you fixed every error on that one port, it doesn't fix the other 100 million ports.
This is more the conversation I was also expecting for us to have when because we started off agreeing, and then I was like, no, Ricky's going to throw some wrench in there. I think though. So I was talking to my kid the other day, and I was talking about how I grew up with heroes, and my grandpa, and then there's Batman and Spider-Man and like Captain America. Which is like stupid for a kid to have for heroes. Like, they aren't like real people, right? But kids don't know any better than that. But they kind of shape the way I view stuff. And like, I always sit on the side of there has to be a right way to do this.
Yeah.
Right. And we might not have figured it out yet, but we can start like doing it, and we just don't make compromises on the right way to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that like when we talk about these sorts of conversations, I tend to like fall on that. But you have a more realistic view, because I know that like people, that's not the way that people view things, right? I'm kind of expecting for everyone to be like, well, I'm just going to be standing up right here, sir, doing whatever I'm supposed to do, following these rules. And people don't do those sorts of things. They kind of live in a world where they have to choose between starving to death and, stealing a piece of bread and stuff like that. And I totally realize that, right? But at the same time, I still have those views.
No, I get you. I mean, it's very admirable to always want the ideal, and I think there's a lot of people that feel that way. I mean, even to me, I would love it if we had the ideals. The problem is, we probably even talked about this on the podcast when we talk about design things. If your solution requires everyone to do something, it'll never work.
Yeah.
And so it's about that. While everyone's struggling with their own problems, how do we look at these problems that nobody can fix by themselves and find a way to actually fix them?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's this situation. So should TikTok be banned in America? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I can't say that. Is India signaling what happened with TikTok? Is it going to do some harm to some people? Yeah, probably. And if it is, we as Americans need to find a way to prop those people up. So we need to continue trying to follow them on YouTube. We continue to need to try to follow them on like whatever else, whether you're Canadian, American, European, whatever. Because regardless of what the government does, it does fall back on us.
Mm-hmm.
And are we going to do that? Probably not, because it's a huge time suck and inconvenience and everything like that. So does that mean that the companies that are promoting these platforms need to do that? Does that mean that, somebody has to do it? Somebody needs to stand up and do this sort of stuff, or things will just fall apart and everything will go back to this terrible dystopian future that we were looking at before. So how do we make that better?
Mm-hmm.
I think is the real question. And we don't have an answer on this podcast.
Yeah, no, we don't. And I'll leave us that I think our biggest issue is our problems are becoming too extrapolated from the real. Like, they're real problems, but I think it's hard for people to wrap their heads around the, like, here's data privacy problems, here's AI problems, and things like that. Because I think we showed very well the world can fix problems. World War II broke out and just destroyed so much of the planet. Economies destroyed, infrastructure destroyed, and we rebuilt all of it. And we rebuilt those countries, and we helped build up the other countries around it. The U.S.'s whole economic boom was just because we weren't destroyed, so we had the infrastructure to help other people get back to where they were. And frankly, 100 years later, world's doing all right.
Yep.
But those were very on-hand problems. That building fell down. It needs to be rebuilt. We need streetlights. We'll build streetlights. And we're very, very good at solving problems like that. I think we have a hard time solving that problem. We have to say, okay, everything right here at home is great. I've got food, air conditioning, water, a happy family, money in my pocket. I've got a job. But what about random person over here on the other side of the world that I'll never see? How do I help that person? And that is just as important, but so much harder to visualize.
Yeah.
That I think that's the world we're finding ourselves in now. Is we've got these very real problems, but they're no longer something you can touch.
Right.
And that's the hurdle we got to get past.
It's much harder. It's much harder to do that and get that in the collective mind.
Yeah.
So I just tasted my warmed up beer.
Oh yeah.
I'll let you taste yours. See what you think.
Very nice. It's not much different because I'm having to hold mine in my mouth to spit it out anyway. But it is, from the get-go, without even having to warm up extra, much brighter. It's very nice. So you're probably tasting it now how I tasted it originally, and it's good.
Yeah, I think this is. I don't think it's the best beer we've had on the podcast this season, because I think that came to the last, episode. But this is like in the maybe, but we've only had 5 episodes, so I can't say top 5. But it's like number 2.
Yeah, it's good.
It's really good. So anyways, this has been Season 7, Episode 5 of the Beer and Broadband Podcast. It's supposed to come out on April 29th, 2024. We'll see if I edit it by then. Otherwise, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time.